And it was a grassroots effort that took a lot of work from everyone. And you know, we did everything we could and found every pressure point we could in Washington, D.C. to get the first field hearing ever in the history of West Plains down here with Congressman Long and myself. And they've never had a field hearing that had over 500 people anywhere in the country. But we did it right here, and that was because everyone pulled out. And we did a lot of oversight hearings in the Natural Resources Committee that I serve on, and questioned Secretary Jewell numerous times. And she said she was going to pause the program. And we're very fortunate that the program is now completely gone. It didn't need to be paused, it just needed to be eliminated. So that's very important. But it took a lot of work from everyone that's in this room. And I'm appreciative of that. And Bob's exactly right. You're never going to find any politician that you agree with 100% of the time. But we all still need to work together, because we got to do everything we can to protect our property rights and stop the federal government from continuing to intrude on our way of life and our freedom. So I appreciate you very much, and thanks for...
the way this Blueways thing got brought to me, I fly to Washington. It's the #1 worst thing about the job. I fly out on Monday, come back on Friday, 3 times a month. Now that 4th weekend, usually I'm somewhere else doing something, and I very rarely spend a weekend in Washington, but 3 out of 4 weekends I'm home. When I'm home, I'm at events like this, and we're going around the district. A lady came up to me one day. She said, "What do you know about Blueways?" And I said, "Well, tell me about it, because I've never heard of it." She said, "You never heard of Blueways?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you're gonna hear about it." And I said, "Okay." So as soon as we headed out to drive back to Springfield, I texted my staff in Washington, and I said, "Find out what Blueways is." Well, about 2 or 3 days later, the letters started coming in. And we got active on the thing. Jason did a great job with it. Peter Kinder led the charge here in Missouri. And if you want a conservative guy, I don't know what color conservative blood is, but if you slit Peter's wrist, the first drop would be conservative blood, and the last drop would be conservative blood. But he does a great, great job, and has for years, holding up for us and holding up for the conservative cause. But that's the way this thing's supposed to work. When you hear from people on the ground about things that they're trying to do to you, as Bob's been enumerating tonight, and when you have a president that says, "I have a pen and a phone," that is extremely worrisome. And I get emails all the time, "Why don't you do something about it? Why don't you do something about it? You said you go up there, you were fed up, do something about it." I said, "Okay, here's what we can do. We can impeach him next week." I'm pretty good friends with the Speaker. I said, "Hey, Mr. Speaker, let's impeach the President." We could do that in the House next week. And then all you got to do is send it over to the Senate and get Harry Reid to do it. So this has to be done at the ballot box. It has to be done with grassroots efforts. So God bless y'all, and thank you all for being here tonight. And thank you, as Jason said, for Jason to get them to hold a field hearing here, get Tom McClintock, the chairman, to come in from California to hold a field hearing. And we walked in that day, and there were over 500 people there. That was very, very impressive to them, and we got that deal stopped, but they'll be back tomorrow for another deal. So God bless you, and thank you all. Thanks for having me.
50 years ago this year, the Speaker stood before an audience out in California and delivered a speech that has gone down as a classic in the modern conservative movement. The speech in the conservative movement was known as the speech when I was growing up. The actual name of it, and you can Google it, is A Time for Choosing. A Time for Choosing, and I encourage you to do that. This speaker stood before an audience in California, and I'll sum up his message in one sentence from that speech. He said, "The issue in this election," in October of 1964, "the issue in this election is whether we abandon the American Revolution and just confess that a tiny intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives better than we can plan them ourselves." The speaker was derided then and subsequently as a washed-up B-movie actor. His name was Ronald Reagan. He spoke for a losing presidential campaign that year, Mr. Goldwater. He spoke for a candidate whose message was rejected overwhelmingly by the American people. But Mr. Reagan didn't quit. 16 years later, he led us to the magnificent victory over Jimmy Carter in 1980, and all the victories that followed for conservative policies throughout the 1980s and beyond. And the man he defeated, Jimmy Carter, was up till now the worst president of my lifetime. Now we confront an even more dangerous threats. I started to say threat, but what I really should say is whole set of threats to our liberties. And had I been allowed to testify at the hearing in West Plains, I would have had a simple message for the folks from the interior. You can promulgate whatever rule you want to on us. We here in Missouri are not going to stand for this. Even if you put the rule through, we're not going to stand for it. And we are not going to stand for anything like it from the Park Service on the scenic riverways. And that is my message, and that's why I said in a letter published in the Southeast Missouri, an op-ed piece, I guess, that they have copies of up here. You do? I believe it was published on January 2nd of this year, and it's been pretty widely circulated on the internet and Facebook, that the time has arrived when we Missourians should correct an error that our forefathers made almost 50 years ago. It was in the late 60s, when we deeded those riverways over to the feds, and it's time for us to take that back.
Yeah.
I've been told that's a pipe dream. I've been told that won't happen. But I've seen a lot of things happen. I'm sure that at this time a year ago, a lot of people didn't think the Blueways could be defeated, but the united effort of all of us made that happen. And I'm proud to have played a small role in it as well. But we can do this, and there are people sitting in this room who will live to see the day, I believe, when the National Scenic Riverways, those precious waterways, and the land surrounding them will be deeded back to the citizens of Missouri where they belong. No, he was not the founder of my party, he was one of the founders of the other party, Thomas Jefferson, after whom our state capital is named, city, who said, that government is best that governs least and is closest to the people. That the other party, the party of my grandfathers, who were both Harry Truman Democrats, most people were in Southeast Missouri, they've long since abandoned that. And if the flame of liberty is going to be carried forth to the young people in this room and the ones yet unborn, then it will have to fall to us. And I'm proud to stand here as the only one who has to run statewide. I don't get to run in a safe Republican district. Here where folks think like you and I do here. I have to run in the cities and in the suburbs, and there's left-wing environmentalists, and I don't speak any differently when I go into the inner city than I do here. I hold high the torch of liberty, and I always will, and that's why I'm proud to stand with you all this evening and humbled to get this award that I'll display on my office wall. I hope you'll come visit me in your state capital. Thank you all.